Lord, I thank you for the day. I pray that you would be with us. And Lord, as we have this season that's supposed to be the season to focus on you and ultimately, Lord, to worship you, I pray that you would direct our hearts and our minds amidst the busyness to do just that. Father, help us to remember to sit at your feet and to worship you instead of being busy only doing all of the stuff that we think needs to be done. Father, we thank you, we love you, and it's in Jesus' name, amen. So you kind of heard in my prayer, many of you, maybe not all, but many of you are probably familiar with the story of Mary and Martha. One is busy doing all the stuff that needs to be done, and hey, somebody's got to cook the meal if you want to have a meal, right? There are logistics that have to happen if we want our goal to happen. Sometimes we have to ask whether that goal is really worth the sacrifice, but that's a different story and not the point of the story that Jesus shares. But then you have Mary who is just sitting at Jesus' feet worshiping. And you have this contrast of these two. And I think about that every Christmas season because as Americans, and especially American Christians, our culture, not just American culture, but American Christian culture, we have so many things that we fill our calendars with that honestly the season goes by and it's, oh, we've got to go to this, oh, we've got to do that, oh, I've got these 20 things to prepare for this or that. I think we miss the point. And this year, and I've told you guys before, I'm not that smart. I didn't plan for the worship series to start right as Christmas is ramping up. I think God did that on purpose because I didn't plan it that way. I had no idea how long our previous series was going to go until we were bringing it to a close. So we're entering into our worship series, and I told you guys a few weeks ago that I've really been torn on how much to integrate versus separate the messages, and ultimately the question is, God, what is it that you want your people to hear? Which, by the way, is always what I'm asking. Doesn't matter what I want. The question is, what does God want you to know and to hear? And so the next few weeks, we're going to be focusing on worship within the context of Christmas. So today's message is simply titled Worthy of Worship. And there's nothing fancy about today's message. And some of you are like, Aaron, there's nothing fancy about any of your messages. That's okay. I don't claim to try to make them fancy. I don't do the whole alliteration thing, right? But we're going to have a series of messages. And full disclosure, I could have come up, but I did some research online, and there are a series of reminders, a company known as Logos. There are a series of reminders and scriptures that have to do with the Christmas season and worship. And I usually, 99.9% of the time, use completely my own research and all of that, but they put this together so well that I don't know how to improve on it. Now, I did. I didn't just rip it off. Of course, I made some changes, but just full disclosure, if you were to search online, you would find these same scriptures, but it's kind of like a meme I saw the other day. I'm waiting to use this on one of my professors. I'm just waiting. The student said something to the professor about, well, you know, do you realize that your whole dissertation was plagiarized? Every single word of your dissertation is found in the dictionary. I got to wait till I know the professor a little better before I pull that one. But ultimately, all this is a series of scriptures that remind us about worshiping in this season. So the arrangement, somebody else put them in order. I'm fleshing them out. So the first one that I want to start off with, worthy of worship. Why is Jesus worthy of worship? Because that's the proposition that I'm making to you. I'm telling you Jesus is worthy of worship. Now it's up to you to decide, do I agree or do I disagree, and why? That's how conversation works. That's how communication and ultimately debate works. So I'm telling you Jesus is worthy of worship, and you have to answer the question, why? So rhetorically, why? In your own heart and mind? Or are you in that place in life where you're like, Aaron, I know what the right answer is. I know I'm supposed to say Jesus, but I'm not feeling it right now, or I'm having some doubts. I'm really not sure. I know that's the answer you want. I know that's the answer the Bible says, but I'm not feeling it. Well, when you're doubting something, so when you've been married for a certain length of time, you're going to have seasons, and nobody's going to admit this because they don't want to get elbowed in the ribs, but you will have seasons where you find yourself less warm fuzzy with your spouse. That's just going to happen. All relationships have that. And when you're feeling less of the warm fuzzies, a really good idea is to go back to the beginning and ask yourself, why did I fall for this person to begin with? See, parents, sometimes when children are doing what children do, you're not having warm fuzzies. So you might want to go back and look at the baby pictures and remember how they stole your heart in the beginning, and regardless of what's going on right now. So that's what I want to do. So going back to the beginning, God, I'm going to stay away from these candles. I'm not going to do it. God created the world and the universe with the spoken word. He spoke things into existence. He spoke and there was light. He spoke and matter came into existence. Can you do that? Half the time I feel like I speak and nobody listens. And that isn't a pastor joke, that's a human joke, okay? See, psychologically, I think it's roughly a few days, I think it was like 3 or 4 days after somebody hears someone speak. At best, they tend to remember 3 to 5% of what was said. Any speaking engagement. Again, that's not a pastor joke, that's a human joke. Most people forget the majority of a conversation within 5 to 10 minutes after it happens. See, we have very short memories. God spoke, and the world came into existence. But we forget that in the daily life. We forget that in the daily grind. And then God created Adam and Eve. He put them in a perfect place, in perfect fellowship with Him. And Adam and Eve, you know the story, they sinned. They represented humanity. The truth is, we would have sinned as well if we were there, but they represented us. And from then on, we were not able to walk in fellowship with God. We were doomed to an eternity without a relationship with God. The Bible also teaches very clearly that if we die without a relationship, and ultimately it's not even the relationship, it's the forgiveness paid for by Jesus' blood. If we die without that, then we go to a place of separation from God, and that place is called hell. So that's the state humanity finds itself in. God creates the perfect world. He puts people in there who are capable of making moral decisions. And almost immediately, they fail and they break creation. Creation itself is affected by our sin. See, this time of year, we all see the funny pictures of Christmas trees and cats and how they often don't get along. Somebody starts videoing and the cat's in the middle of the tree and they fuss at the cat and it takes off and the whole thing gets knocked over. Or the cat just takes the flying leap, right? And it's the old joke, this is why we can't have nice things, right? Or you just have kids and that happens somehow anyway. Or you may or may not cause that problem and blame it on the cat that you don't have. See, God gave us a perfect world and we broke it. So in this circumstance, as God is laying down the punishment, turn to Genesis 3, chapter 15. You've heard me reference this one before if you have been here with me the last few years. Genesis 3, specifically verse 15. In context, this is where God is laying down the punishment for sin. And he's talking to the woman. He says, he's talking to the serpent. I will put enmity, strife, a warring relationship. I will put enmity between you and the woman. And the serpent, by the way, is Satan. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. Now, you could take that at an uber literal level. That's why women don't like snakes, but that's not universally true. There's something else going on here. See, Satan chose to come in the form of or indwell, however we interpret that, a snake. God's not simply talking to a snake. He's talking to the snake that led a rebellion in heaven against God, that tempted Adam and Eve to sin and continues wanting to destroy our relationship with Him. Now, let me ask you this. If you had an animal that absolutely refused to follow the rules, destroyed your house, destroyed everything that you put there, how well would it go for that animal? See, some of you will get this joke, some of you will not, some of you will be horrified by it. That's normal with me. 25 to 30 cents will take care of that, depending on inflation and the current costs. That's my philosophy of an animal that absolutely will not listen. But that's not God's attitude. Instead, He looked upon us with compassion. And in Genesis 3:15, He continues, after talking about the enmity, He says, "He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel." Some translations may say crush the head. The idea is a crushing blow, like in self-defense, you teach people to stomp with the heel, your heel, on the bridge of another person's foot. That's a basic self-defense tactic. That's the idea of crushing with the heel. See, the snake that wants to see everything God has created destroyed has now tempted, and humanity has fallen into sin. And God could have just destroyed humanity. He could have just said, you know what? You guys don't deserve grace. You don't deserve mercy. You deserve punishment, which is true. And now you're going to get it. And just wiped humanity off the face of the earth. He could have just destroyed the universe, and it would have gone back to an existence of nothing except God in perfect fellowship with Himself. But He didn't. He decided to redeem this rebellious generation. And in this punishment also comes the greatest promise of all of Scripture. Genesis 3:15 is one you need to have memorized, because it is the first prophecy of Jesus. He is here saying that a descendant of Eve and Adam, a descendant of Eve, would crush the head of the serpent, but his heel would be bruised. In other words, it's going to hurt. It's going to cost him something. But he will be victorious. This is the first prophecy of the coming of Jesus. So why is God worthy of worship? Well, first off, He's the Creator. So He's already worthy of worship because I can't do that. You can't do that. But also because in the midst of our rebellion, instead of looking at us to punish us, He looks at us to redeem us. See, most people in society have the view of God at this point that He is the kid using the magnifying on the anthill. Now, some of you in the older generation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of the younger generation, that may not connect. In other words, people have the idea and the view of God oftentimes that He is malevolent. He is an evil God because He punishes people. That He's doing it because He enjoys punishing people. But that's not the story of Scripture. He could have punished Adam and Eve, wiped them out, and that would have been the end of it. But instead, He had compassion and provided a way of escape. He provided the promise of the one who would make all things right and ultimately restore the relationship between man and God, the ultimate mediator between God and man. And then we see in Genesis 49, let's turn to Genesis 49 verses 8 through 12. And I'll start reading. You'll be able to catch up fairly quickly. Same book. Genesis 49, 8 through 12. This is Israel. Don't let Israel and the term Judah confuse you, okay? Israel was renamed, the man Israel. He's talking to one of his sons, Judah, okay? All right, so Judah, this is his blessing to his son at the end of his life. You could also say prophecy, because that is accurate here. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Now, in the modern day, we tend to be, how do I want to word this without getting in too much trouble? We tend to have pretty thin skin when it comes to warrior language. But when you're in a place where you are the only one to protect yourself and your family, warrior language is important. When we're in a spiritual battle for our lives and the lives of those around us, warrior language is important. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Well, how often does that happen in real life? How many of your siblings praise you? Judah, your brothers shall praise you. In other words, he's going to have a place of preeminence. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. It's the idea of choking the life out of the enemy. And yet, the fact of choking and not killing is actually an act of compassion. I want to point that out. We don't think about it that way. Your father's sons shall bow down to you. In case they didn't get it in the first part, he's making it even more clear. Now they're going to bow down. To whom do you bow down? The one to whom you owe allegiance. One who is in a position above you. In other words, royalty. Judah is a lion's. Now, verse 9 is a little confusing, so bear with me on this one. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion. So, without getting into too much technical detail, he's comparing Judah and some believe himself to a lion and a cub. And what he's talking about is the lion learning how to hunt. That's essentially what he's talking about. I could go much more in depth, but for today's purposes, just grant me this one. You can research it more on your own. But he's saying, from the prey, my son, you have gone up. In other words, you've captured your prey and you're now consuming it. He couches, he lies down as a lion. Notice the imagery of a lion. We associate lions with what? Strength, power, stealth. Anybody remember the old song, King of the Jungle, that was sort of redone when The Lion King came out and the younger ones are going, what? Yeah, I know, The Lion King's old for some of you too. He couches down as a lion. And as a lion, who dares rouse him up? In other words, Judah is in the process of growing up, but he's going to grow up to be a king. He's going to grow up to be one with whom you don't mess. In America, we have an expression, don't poke the bear, for a reason. They may look cuddly, but they will absolutely destroy you. Well, I don't think it's wise to take a stick and poke a lion either. Don't believe me? Poke a house cat, see how that goes. Now imagine it much, much, much bigger and angry. Verse 10, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. What is a scepter? It's a representation of royalty, kingship. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. So in other words, there is going to be a king established from Judah who has a limited kingdom? No, an endless kingdom, one that has no end. And then the last part of verse 10 is also confusing, and even commentators don't fully understand it. It says, until Shiloh comes. We're not getting into that one today because that's like a seminary level class to try and explain that one. So we're going to move on. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. So even though we don't really know what that little part means, it doesn't change the fact that the people will be obedient to this descendant of Judah. He ties the foal to the vine, or he ties his foal to the vine. What does the vine represent to the nation of Israel? Anybody remember Jesus talking about the vine? You can write down John chapter 15, verse 1. That's a parallel section. That's what Jesus is referring to when he talks about being the vine. See, to Israel, the vine represented God's blessing, the sweetness of life. And Jesus took that analogy and tied it to being identified with him. But it was foretold all the way back here in Genesis 49. He ties his foal to the vine. Remember, Jesus rode in on a donkey. He didn't come in on a white horse like a conquering hero, even though he could have. He came in humility, but also in power. Just like a lion stalks its prey and then pounces. Just because it's subtle, just because it's quiet, just because it's unexpected doesn't mean it doesn't have power. He ties his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine. We associate that with the blood and the sacrifice of Jesus. And his robes in the blood of grapes, in case you didn't catch it in the first part. Then verse 12, his eyes are dull from wine and his teeth white from milk. In other words, I don't touch alcohol because my dad was an alcoholic, so don't read too much into this. But I have been told that there is a state when you drink where you are just happy. That's what this is referring to. It's that contented state where you're just happy. His eyes are dull from wine. In other words, not a care in the world. Don't need to worry about safety. Don't need to worry about anything else. I'm just content in this moment. And his teeth white from milk. See, milk comes from livestock. Livestock represent wealth and provision. In other words, this one will be blessed. So we have here in Genesis 49 the Lion of Judah. And most of us understand the connection. If you don't, I'm just going to state it. Between the lion also mentioned in Revelation, referring to Jesus in Revelation 5:5. That is the Lion of Judah, referring to Jesus. See, the imagery within this passage talks about the Gentiles being grafted into the vine. The donkey tied to the vine. Judah starting as a cub, symbolizing royalty and growing in strength and honor in his kingship. Why is he worthy of worship? Because he is the answer to life's problems. See, it's a cliche when somebody's struggling in life, they're going through a hard time, just going, Jesus is the answer is probably going to get you punched, or at least they're going to want to punch you, if that's your only answer. It doesn't mean it's not true. It means they need more than that. But truly, Jesus is the solution. Whatever the problem, Jesus is the solution. Do you have turmoil between you and someone else? Well, Jesus is the solution to solving that problem. Do you have a need that needs to be met? Well, you can pray. You can ask for provision. He is the ultimate provider. He is the solution. Are you lonely? Does this time of year remind you of pain when it should remind you of joy? Resting in the knowledge of those that are with Christ, resting in the knowledge of what this season means, Jesus truly is the solution as we draw closer to him. So he's worthy of worship because he solves the problem of sin. He's also worthy of worship because he is the Lion of Judah. And then third today, he is our ultimate mediator, and we find that in Exodus chapter 1 through chapter 2. Now, I'm not reading that whole section today, but I just want you to know from Exodus chapter 1:1 to Exodus chapter 2, verse 10 is the section specifically that you would do well to look at later today. But in this, we have the story of Moses. Now, some of you may or may not remember. The older ones, you probably watched the movie The Ten Commandments, even if you don't remember the story from the Bible. But the story of Moses, if you've never thought about this, what was Moses called to do?
Lead his people out of bondage.
Lead his people out of bondage. I couldn't have put it better. That's Moses' job. They are slaves in Egypt. God says, hey, Moses, thank you for volunteering. Moses is like, I didn't volunteer. God said, yes, you did. Thank you for volunteering. You were voluntold. Moses, your job is to take those people, get them from point A to point B as whole and healthy as possible. And by the way, I'm going to do all the work. You just need to chill and be the leader. Aaron paraphrase. What is it that Jesus accomplishes for us? Okay, nobody's willing. The same thing. Except instead of it being an earthly slavery that can, by definition, I mean, let's face it, slavery is horrible, not denying that. But you can only live so long. So slavery, by definition, as horrid as it is a temporary problem. Now, that's temporary by perspective. You live 100 years in it. It seems like forever. But ultimately, by definition, it's temporary because it only lasts your lifetime. But slavery and sin lasts for eternity. Because the punishment for sin is death. It is spiritual punishment in hell for eternity. See, Moses was a foreshadowing of Jesus. Some people say a type of Christ, typology. Be careful with typology if you're studying on your own. But Moses is a foreshadowing of Jesus. His job was to take people out of slavery into the promised land. Jesus takes us out of spiritual slavery and bondage into ultimately fellowship with Him for eternity, which is known as heaven. See, it's not about getting to heaven, it's about being in right fellowship with God for eternity. Heaven is the blessing we receive by nature of being near God. Don't get it confused. This is not about getting to heaven. It's about being in a right relationship with God forever. Heaven is the gift that we are given by nature of being so close. See, Moses is ultimately a mediator between God and man. In his day, when he was physically walking this earth, he was the mediator between the people of Israel and God. Jesus is the mediator between all men and God. So why is he worthy of worship? Because he's the only one that can do that. Moses' ministry only lasted, let's say, 50 years. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. I don't know exactly how long it was before that God called him, so I'll just throw an extra 10 years on there. Maybe Moses' ministry lasted for 50 years. In the grand scheme of eternity, 50 years isn't that much. Even in the scheme of one generation to the next, somebody dies at 50 years old, everybody says, wow, they died too young, which I agree. 50 years isn't that much. Moses, as great as he was, only had a temporary effect. Well, that's not fair. He only had a temporary ministry. The effect is still felt today, but he had a temporary ministry. Jesus' ministry is eternal. It started before the foundations of the world. When God created the universe, He said, let us make man in our image. Let us make man in our image. See, Jesus' ministry started before the foundations of the earth. And he is the Lion of Judah mentioned in Revelation. He is the mediator. He is the sacrificial lamb that was slain to provide for the sins of the world. He is the only one that is capable of doing that, because he is the only one that is fully God and therefore able to make an infinite payment to an infinite God. And he is the only human to ever live a perfect life and therefore be capable of being a spotless lamb. He is worthy of worship. This time of year, we are in danger of missing all of that. We put up lights and decorations. We play with fire. We drive around the neighborhood looking at houses to see how pretty they are. And we think a little about Jesus. But do we really worship during this time? Or are we distracted by the stuff of the holiday season? So my challenge to you, I have two challenges. One, are you Mary or Martha? Martha was the one that was too concerned about logistics. Mary was the one that said, forget logistics, I'm just going to sit here and worship Jesus while I can. It's not denying that stuff needs to be done, but in this season, are you Mary or Martha? Are you worshiping during this season, or are you letting the worship stuff kill the worship of the only one worthy of worship? My second challenge, possibly, you don't have that relationship. Maybe during this time of year you get extra antsy because you know you're missing something. Or maybe not. Maybe just right now the Holy Spirit is prompting you, saying, hey, when he talked about forgiving sins, you've never accepted that. You've never acknowledged your sin, forsaken it, and recognized that Jesus is the only one that can take care of that sin for you. Maybe you need to do that today. Search your heart. Don't let the fact that you've been coming to church for years give you an automatic answer. Search your heart. Do I have genuine faith? And if so, am I worshiping during this season, or am I letting the stuff of the world choke out the light within me? Let's pray. Father, I thank you for the day. I pray that you would be with us. I pray that you would lead and guide us. And Lord, show us your will. Show us your way. I pray that you'd work in hearts and minds. I pray that we would each respond this morning in the way that we need to. And Father, most importantly, I pray that wherever we are in relation to you at this moment, I pray that we would draw closer to you in worship. Help us, Lord, to see that you are indeed worthy of worship. Father, we thank you. We love you. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.